Mario Kart 8 Deluxe has 96 tracks. Since its inception on the Wii U, 4 cups of DLC, an updated port on the Switch, and then 12 more cups of DLC, it's become the best-selling game in the series, and one of the best-selling games of all time. Honestly though, not all of those 96 tracks are created equal. Today we're going through the ones I think are the worst of the bunch, from the absolute bottom of the barrel to the ones that are actually pretty good. But don't worry, we've got some real stinkers in here. If you want to see me rank tracks from other Mario Kart games too, let me know in the comments. But for now, let's get into it. First up is the lacking tier. Coming in dead last is Baby Park. And look, I get it, I understand what this track is going for. It's going for chaos. I've played a lot of Double Dash, the game this track originally came from, and the chaos actually works better there. I'm not a game designer or anything, but I think it's because in Double Dash, you've got less karts racing around, but bigger, personalized items flying about. You know, if you get flattened by a huge Bowser shell in Double Dash, you know exactly who did that. And I would say that the chaos feels more earned there. In Mario Kart 8 though, I feel like it just never really gets to that chaotic level. I feel like I probably get hit by some random bullshit once, maybe twice a race, and honestly that number could be increased. And when I do get hit, it never feels that impactful because you recover a hell of a lot quicker in this game, and bumping into other races gives you this little spin boost anyway, so none of the chaos feels as detrimental as it probably should. And when the chaos doesn't land, you're literally just driving around an oval for a minute and a half. If I'm being honest, I'd probably give Baby Park like a 5 out of 10, you know, bang average. And the fact that a 5 out of 10 is the worst track in this game tells you everything about the quality of Mario Kart 8's track list. The silver lining is that whenever this comes on in a random versus race, I'm never really that disappointed, because before it can get truly boring, it's already over. The words inoffensive and forgettable basically sums up Toad Circuit. It's essentially a figure 8 with a little wiggle at the end, plus it's got a very normal theme, you know, nothing going on that front. But the thing that makes it worse than it should be is that this was one of the first courses released in the Booster Course Pass DLC. The first impressions for a paid DLC for one of the best-selling games of all time, and they lead with this? Bringing back an intro-level track is boring enough on its own, but you're bringing it back in a DLC that you're almost definitely playing after the main game? Like, why are we going backwards? On top of that, a lot of the early DLC gave the graphics a noticeably more blocky and cartoony look compared to the base game, which, fine, that's a valid visual style, but when you've been playing the base game of Mario Kart 8 and then this shows up, it's chalk and cheese in the worst way. Mario Circuit 3 is honestly such a strange choice of course to bring back. It's the most reused track in the entire series. It's been in 5 Mario Kart games including this one, and it even came back again in the game after this, and yet somehow, almost every time it returns, it feels like the least amount of effort has been put into it. Mario Kart 8 has this amazing reputation for taking old, outdated tracks and modernizing them, keeping the essence of the original but making them actually fun to play today. And with Mario Circuit 3, they just kind of gave up. Compare it to the GBA Mario Circuit that's also in this game. You know, that's a pretty flat, basic track too, but they elevated a section of it and added in a secret glider ramp, and just those small changes do make a real difference. Here though, it's the bare minimum. They've slapped an orange skybox on it, but didn't even bother adding any sunset lighting. You know, that would have given it just that extra bit of care. Other courses in this game get that treatment of care, but this one just doesn't. I do like the one hairpin turn and the shortcut you can take, but that's about it. Quick note before we go any further. You might notice that some of the gameplay footage in this video isn't from my own recordings, and I just want to be transparent about that. I'm a small channel that doesn't make much money, and a capture card just isn't an expense I can make right now, especially for a video type I might not revisit soon. So a big thank you to gamer JGB and Yoshi Gaming 13 for providing most of the footage here. All creators are credited in the top corner throughout the video, and links to every video I've used are down in the description. If I do end up making more videos where I'll need a capture card down the line, I'll make sure to get one. But for now, thank you for understanding. And let's move on to... The big complaint you'll hear about Sunset Wilds is that the sun doesn't actually set anymore, unlike in the GBA original. And yeah, that does make it worse. Personally though, I've got no nostalgia for the GBA game, so I'm not gutted about it the way some people rightfully are. My problem with it is that it's just flat and boring. They've added a few hills near the end, which is something, and there are some sharp turns that I actually find quite fun, but a few sharp turns and 2 good hills does not a particularly good course make. There's just not enough here to get excited about. The animal tracks are cool though. I've never been to the real Tokyo, but it's gotta be more interesting than Tokyo Blur. We are literally just racing on a motorway for essentially the entire track, and by the third lap, it is very motorway. It's also surprisingly grey for a track inspired by one of the most vibrant, colourful cities in the world. When you think of Tokyo, you think of neon lights, energy, colour, and I wouldn't say this track had any of that. I'd still rather race on it more so than any of the previously mentioned tracks, but it's also the one that I forget about the most. I want to say up front that I don't automatically dislike desert-themed tracks the way I know a lot of people do. A skeleton-themed desert course is actually a really interesting idea, and funnily enough, Mario Kart World would go on to do that concept and pull it off better, but we'll get to that in another video. The problem with Bone Dry Dunes is that it's just boring, it's just dull. Visually and gameplay wise, especially for a special cup track, I'd expect the standard to be a lot higher, and some of the corners feel really clunky, like they're difficult and not in a fun, challenging way, just difficult in a bad and a bit annoying way. The idea for this track was there, but in most ways the execution just wasn't. This one got a much better remake in Mario Kart World, so it's a bit hard not to compare them. There are things I like about this version though. The verticality is fun, and there are loads of tricks you can pull off, but the camera kind of plots against you the whole time. The railing blocks your view more than it should, and when you go off the big jump, you genuinely cannot see where you're about to land. Oh, and the colour scheme is really neon and irradiated, like someone turned the saturation up way too far and just left it. It's a bit of a mess. Sky Garden is technically a remake of the GBA Sky Garden, but it's really nothing like the original. I'm far from the first person to say this, but it feels more like a stripped down version of Cloud Top Cruise if anything. And it is just quite basic. There's a bouncy leaf shortcut near the start that I'm pretty sure is actually a long cut, which is just a bit embarrassing. There is one genuinely cool moment though, a shortcut near the end that leads into a glide to the finish line, and that can get pretty exciting. But one good moment doesn't save what is otherwise just a pretty forgettable track. Now, the fine tier. These are tracks I think are fine, obviously. Paris Promenade is fine. It seems very French, which I appreciate, although I've never actually been to Paris, which is quite embarrassing, seeing as I live only a day trip away. Anyway, one thing I will say in its favour is that a lot of the city tracks in this game are overly complicated, and this one isn't. The first 2 laps are simple, and the third lap is just the same as those first 2, but backwards, and that actually works really nicely. There's a pretty interesting split path moment where you can take the slower route but get some items, or the quicker route and get no items. And I like the colour palette, up to a point. I think the reason this track is so far down on the list is that the track is pleasant, but it's never that interesting. There's nothing that makes you lean forward, there's no moment where you think, oh, that was cool. It's pleasant, but not particularly memorable. And when the quality of courses in this game are the quality that they are, pleasant is just not going to cut it. I can actually give a unique perspective on London Loop because I live in London. Yeah, I do. This track is fine, but knowing London well actually helps me put a finger on exactly what's wrong with a bunch of these city tracks. Yes, there are landmarks, the London Eye, Buckingham Palace, Big Ben, but they're just in the background. The ones you actually interact with aren't much better. You drive through Covent Garden for about 4 seconds, over Tower Bridge for 2 seconds, through Admiralty Arch for about 1 second. And other than that, it's just road, taking you from landmark to landmark as quickly as possible without giving any of them the time to actually make an impact to the race. And that's the core issue. Compare it to Delfino Plaza, where the drawbridge is this big, memorable set piece. A lot of the track is built around it. London Loop doesn't seem to want to linger on anything, so even Tower Bridge, one of the most iconic drawbridges in the world. In London Loop, it's tiny, and it's just over in a flash, and getting you on to the next thing. For example, you could set an entire track in just Covent Garden, or Hyde Park, or in the Tate Modern or something. And the layout ends up being overly complex without being interesting. And the colour palette is really washed out. I know Britain is famous for grey, miserable weather, but central London is actually kind of overstimulating if anything, and it is far from dull. This track completely misses that energy. I do like the music though, but is it that London-y? Look, I'm not a rock music expert, but it sounds a bit too clean to be instantly recognisable as British rock to me. Look, if I am wrong on that front, please do let me know in the comments. But all in all, this track is a letdown for sure. Water Park is honestly just sweet. Like, that is the best word for it. It reminds me of one of those little baby areas you get at a water park. You know, calm, colourful, non-threatening, and that's completely fine for a Mushroom Cup track. The big loop-de-loop is kind of fun. I wouldn't say exciting exactly, but it's a nice little moment. This track isn't trying to be anything more than it is, and there's something quite endearing about that. But, you know, does it make a huge impact in my brain? No. I think the idea behind Mario Circuit is to really show off the anti-gravity mechanic, and on paper, it makes perfect sense. This is Mario Kart 8, so having a figure of 8 Mobius strip as the central gimmick is a really clever concept. But here's my issue. The way the anti-gravity works in this game, you as the racer always just stay right side up from your perspective. And from your perspective, it's the background that twists and changes. And that is exactly what happens here. You drive down a cool turn, your wheels switch, and then it more so feels like the background starts doing all sorts of twisting and turning. But you're not looking at the background when you race. You're focused on the track in front of you. So the whole anti-gravity showcase kind of happens in your peripheral vision. Compare that to Mario Kart Stadium, which does it so much more simply and effectively. You know, you see the track rising up at a 90-degree angle, you hit the base of it, your wheels change, and then you just go up. That makes way more of an impact. In Mario Circuit, it doesn't quite land the same way, and outside of that, I just don't find it hugely fun to race on either. DS Mario Circuit was honestly a bit of a strange addition to the Booster Course Pass because it's now the 4th Mario Circuit in the game. 4 circuits, Mario. 4. That's insane. The theming isn't particularly interesting, nothing about the corners or layout is especially challenging or exciting. There's a bit where you go through a foresty area with a sleeping Wiggler who wakes up on the final lap, which is a cute idea, but he's not exactly hard to avoid. It's pretty clearly a DS era track that hasn't been modernised much. It's in the fine tier, and it really is just fine. And with the standard that a lot of tracks in this game set, it just doesn't keep up. To me, Sweet Sweet Canyon is like a more orange version of Water Park. The racing is more interesting than Water Park, but it's not that interesting. It's got the Mario Kart 8 split path thing that quite a lot of tracks do in this game, but probably at its least compelling here. The colour palette is really orange-brown and never really pops, but there is a piss fountain. Riverside Park is fine. I like the orange sunset contrasting against the green foliage. That's a nice orange look that really pops. The Patuis walking along and blowing items into the air is a cool little touch. And going through a mountain and driving through a waterfall at the very end is a cool way to end a lap. But outside of those bits, it doesn't do a huge amount for me. It's short, it's pleasant, and it's a bit forgettable. Not unlike the other GBA tracks in this tier. I think Ice Ice Outpost is a cool concept. 2 split paths, 1 yellow and 1 green, weaving through glaciers and icebergs, and you're constantly making decisions about which route will let you take the fastest line. That's a fun idea, and the shortcuts where you can drive directly on the ice are genuinely hard to pull off, which makes landing them feel really satisfying. But to put my genius hat on, I think the issue is that the 2 paths never feel distinct enough from each other. You're switching between them, hoping one is faster, but in the moment it's actually hard to tell if your choices are really making a difference, so the strategic element loses a bit of its bite. The idea is there, the execution just falls slightly short of what it could be. Madrid Drive, more like Midrid. I'd like to take this opportunity to apologise. The only time I've been to Madrid has been in Mario Kart. I am sure the real Madrid is lovely and not at all mid. There are bits I genuinely like here. There's a brief moment where you duck into a gallery and a market and a shopping mall, all of which are fun, if over incredibly quickly. The fountain section is enjoyable, and there's a Wiggler wandering around a city square, which is cute, but the layout is overly complicated IMO, and overall it reminds me of a slightly better London loop, with a much more vibrant colour palette. In my desiccated little brain, Rome Avanti is kind of basically like Madrid Drive, but set at night, with TARDISes in it for some reason. What I like about this one is that it uses the Colosseum really well. Driving on top of it in lap 1 is a memorable moment, and then in the 3rd lap you come back inside it and have to dodge chain chomps, which is both really fun and a really good way to show off such an iconic landmark. Other than that though, we've got more convoluted city track layouts again. But really, who am I to judge? I've never actually been to Rome, so for all I know the Colosseum might not even exist. For all I know, Rome might not even exist. I think I like Toad's Turnpike more than most people do. The music and the vibe really nail that feeling of driving through a busy city at night on a motorway, and I'm into that. You can trick and paraglide off some of the cars, and there are anti-gravity sections on the walls that are slower but give you a safer line through the traffic. All good stuff. My issue is that the stretches with no traffic are just a bit dull. It often goes congested, clear, and when it's clear, there's a pretty obvious racing line, and nothing much to think about. The track is at its best when the traffic is making you react, and at its most boring when it's not. I've always had a soft spot for snow-themed tracks. They tend to feel really cozy, especially when the music leans into that Christmassy vibe, which Snowland does. I really like the pink and blue colour palette. You know, it reminds me of ice cream. And I like ice cream. The item boxes that slide in and form a little conga line along the road is a charming detail, and the big shortcut is satisfying to pull off. Other than that though, it's quite similar in feel to Riverside Park. You know, originally from the GBA, short, a bit of added verticality, pleasant but not particularly exciting. It's like the snowy brother of Riverside Park, which isn't a bad thing, but it's not an amazing thing either. I think I like GBA Mario Circuit more than most people do. Sometimes all the modernization a retro track needs is just one or two simple changes, and here, just raising one corner of the track makes a real difference to how it plays. There's also a short hop shortcut and a glider shortcut, both of which I used to be able to pull off, but I just can't anymore, and that's my problem. Is the theme interesting? Is the layout wild? No and no. But it's the second course of the Shell Cup. It's not supposed to go crazy, it's supposed to ease you in, and it does that well. Boo Lake completes the three-man GBA Brotherhood alongside Snowland and Riverside Park. All three have a really clear, strong theme, all three are pretty short, and all three have had a bit of verticality added to them in this remake. Boo Lake actually has the most verticality out of the three, which helps it stand out. What I also like is that they added the lake itself to this remake. The original GBA version didn't even have one, which is a bit funny in retrospect. Again, it's nice. It does the job, but it doesn't blow my mind. I know this isn't completely fair, but it's hard not to compare Choco Mountain to the version that appears in Mario Kart World, which I think is a significantly better realization of the concept. The muddy, chocolatey mountain aesthetic has a lot of potential, and in this version it just doesn't quite get there. The track is functional and inoffensive, there are some decent corners with a bit of unpredictability with the falling rocks, but I wouldn't say that anything in it is poppin'. This, just like Sky High Sunday, feels like a beta build of the track, waiting to be finished properly, and Mario Kart World came along years later and finished it. What I've always liked about Cheap Cheap Bitch is the variety. You go from boardwalk, to gliding through the air, to sandy bits near the sea, into the water itself, through a little foresty area, and back to the boardwalk. It covers a lot of ground, if you pardon the expression, for a beach theme track, and it genuinely feels like a day at a tropical seaside, which is nice. The problem is there's a pretty clear fastest racing line that skips the winding sand path entirely, and just cuts through the water. And the sand path is a lot more twisty and fun, but it is just way slower, so you end up in this situation where the enjoyable route and the correct route are different things, and that is a bit of a design flaw. One thing I'll say in Shroom Ridge's favour over Toad's Turnpike? One thing I'll say in Shroom Ridge's favour over Toad's Turnpike is that the traffic here feels less predictable, which keeps you on your toes a bit more. The glider shortcut is fun, and there's a little air current shortcut that I also enjoy. And driving along the edge of a cliff gives it a certain kind of intensity. The visual presentation is a bit of a victim of that simplified early booster course pass art style though, which makes it feel a bit flat compared to the base game tracks. It's got some fun ideas, but doesn't fully make the most out of them. Twisted Mansion. The name really earns itself. The sewer section is genuinely twisted, and unlike Mario Circuit, where the anti-gravity sort of happens in the background and you never really know which way is up, not great for a tutorial track, here the confusion of not knowing which way is up is the whole point. You're meant to feel disoriented, and so when the track twists and turns you around, it works. That said, I do think they could have gone a bit wilder with it. Compare it to Bowser's Castle. They're not that different in theory, both leaning into this dark, dangerous, obstacle-heavy vibe in a big house. But Bowser's Castle commits to the madness in a way that Twisted Mansion doesn't quite reach. There's a more interesting version of this track in there somewhere. Now, a little bit of housekeeping. In this video of mine, I said I'd make videos based on the top 2 comments, the top FNAF suggestion and the top non-FNAF suggestion. Well, this video that you're watching right now is the top non-FNAF suggestion, so thank you to PidgeyPod for that suggestion. If you've got a FNAF idea, go and drop it in the comments on that video, because a video based off the top FNAF suggestion will be coming very soon too. As for what's next on the channel, here's the roadmap. First, there's this video you're watching right now, then a cheeky sequel, which will be coming very soon. After that, I'll be making that FNAF suggestion video I was literally just talking about. And then, as a special one-off treat, because a certain someone has been requesting it relentlessly, I'll be doing a chill JT music tier list. But that's in the future. Right now, it's time for... Donut Plains 3 is super simple, and that is definitely its weakest quality. But hear me out, because I genuinely really like this track, and I know that's very subjective. The shortcut at the end is satisfying. The just rained aesthetic is pulled off brilliantly. Maybe as a stupid Brit, the just rained look makes me feel at home. And the music? I love the music. If this came on in a random race, I'd honestly be quite happy about it. Is it objectively brilliant? No. But I like it. And it's my list. New York Minute is okay. It's less convoluted than Madrid, London or Rome, but more interesting than Paris or Tokyo, which puts it in a decent middle ground for the city tracks. And I like the music too. However, I think that it's also a victim of that not particularly pleasing to the eye effect that some of the booster course pass tracks have. And I wouldn't say that the track layout is all that titillating. Also, New York is famously one of the most traffic-choked cities in the world, and there are no moving cars in this track at all. I've never been to New York, but even I know that's a missed opportunity. I'm walking here. Okay, I'm sorry for putting this one here, because I know it's a fan favourite. Actually, no, I'm not sorry, it's my list. My favourite bit of Electrodrome are the staircases near the end, where each step plays a beat as you drive over it, and you can slide from one set of steps to the others. That's cool AF, and it does the split path thing that a lot of Mario Kart 8 tracks do, and it does it fine. I think the overall course design is a little lacking, and I just don't love the aesthetic. I know why people adore this track, the music especially, people go absolutely mad for it, and I wish I felt the same. I like it, I just don't love it. And in a ranking of all the courses in this amazing game, I Like It puts you pretty low down comparatively. Moo Moo Meadows is the first track of the Shell Cup, so by design it needs to be simple and welcoming, and it nails that completely. I love the dawn or sunset vibe, I'm not sure which one it is. I love the cows wandering across the road. I like that you can trick off the mole tunnels, and the rolling hills at the start that you drift through are a really great opening. There's also a nice little choice between taking the glider path or staying grounded. It's all in all very simple, which is its biggest negative, but I can't get too mad about that. Also, fun fact, Moo Moo Meadows debuted in Mario Kart Wii, skipped Mario Kart 7, appeared in both versions of Mario Kart 8, and now is in Mario Kart World. So in the last 18 years, it's been in the most recent Mario Kart game for 15 of them. I don't know who at Nintendo loves Moo Moo Meadows so much, but I do know that this is the best version. Hyrule Circuit is okay. The standout moment for me is the shortcut in the middle, where you have to hit all the spin boost pillars before you can take it, and it's actually pretty difficult, and I like that. It feels like a little Zelda puzzle baked into a Mario Kart track, which is a really fun idea. But outside of that, I feel like it doesn't really dig into what makes Zelda special. I'm no Zelda expert, but if you can imagine there was a series called like New Super Zelda Bros, or you know, a real baseline take on the series, and then they made a Mario Kart track based on that, that's kind of what this feels like. The Zelda-ness of it is very unseasoned. Piranha Plant Cove is designed like a city track if it wasn't set in a city, but set in some underwater ruins instead, which is a cool idea in theory, but the layout is overly convoluted, and each lap kind of crosses over itself in ways that feel a bit random rather than purposeful. To compare it to a track that does the each lap feels different thing brilliantly, Mount Wario takes you on a proper journey. You know, lap 1 you jump out of a plane onto a snowy mountain, lap 2 you're going through offices and across a dam, lap 3 it's all downhill skiing ending in one massive ski jump. You know, in that course, every lap has a clear identity. Piranha Plant Cove's laps just sort of overlap each other in a purpley, underwatery, ruinsy sort of blur. That said, there are some really fun moments. Going in and out of the water is enjoyable, and the huge drops into the water, which give you the unique opportunity to take some massive shortcuts, is always fun. Good moments, but messy overall. Okay, we're finally on to the actually good tier. Aesthetic-wise, Rock Mountain is quite new Super Mario Bros.y, you know, a bit bright, a bit plasticky, not the most interesting visual style. But what I really like about this track is how glider-centric it is. The whole thing is built around getting airborne, and it commits to that in a way a lot of tracks don't. A little moment I like is the glider section at the end of the lap. If you veer over to the updraft shortcut, you can start laps 2 and 3 significantly further ahead than where lap 1 begins. This may not be the most show-stopping track of all time, but that kind of reward for knowing the track is really satisfying. Royal Raceway is just simple and lovely. It's got this really pleasant celebratory energy to it, like a garden party on a sunny afternoon. There's something about the wide sweeping corners, the big jump, the chiming bells, the hot air balloons, and the general pace and vibe of the track that just puts you in a good mood. It's not trying to blow your mind, it's just a really pleasant race through a really pleasant setting. Sometimes that goes a long way. Now, I have actually been to Amsterdam as a tourist once, so I feel slightly qualified to say that I'm not sure Amsterdam Drive totally captures the essence of the city. The real Amsterdam is actually quite quaint and rustic, winding cobbled streets, brick-built buildings, very cozy. This track goes for something a lot more colourful and simplified, and I think that loses a bit of the charm. That said, what it does nail is the canals. The whole track being built around the waterways is spot on. That really is what makes Amsterdam unique, and I love that they specifically incorporated the trams because they knew that I was going to ride one years after this course was made. Thanks guys. I also appreciate that it's not afraid to show some of the rural countryside either. It's not a perfect Amsterdam, but it's got the right instincts. Daisy Circuit is a pretty simple circuit, but the atmosphere is genuinely lovely. The orangey sunset lighting is beautiful, and the whole thing has a warm, relaxed energy that is just bloody nice. The jump that sends you flying through the statue of Luigi and Daisy is a great moment too. The issue is that the track design doesn't quite live up to the atmosphere it creates. Compare it to something like Toad Harbor. That track has a similarly gorgeous coastal setting, but the design actually weaves the environment into the racing. Even just being able to trick off a boat in Toad Harbor does so much to make the setting feel alive. Daisy Circuit has the looks, but the track itself could do with a bit more of them. With Dry Desert, there may be some double dash bias here, but it's a personal list, so of course it's going to be biased. The pokies that arch over into an upside down U shape are a highlight. Having to decide whether to go for the coin underneath them, knowing you might clip one, is a fun little risk-reward moment. And the oasis that appears near the end is a bit random, but it's a welcome change of scenery. The falling pillars add some extra tricks with each lap, and the shortcuts you can take through the sand are fun too. It's got a pretty basic desert aesthetic, you know, I won't pretend otherwise, but there's enough personality here to keep it interesting. Dragon Driftway is a bit like Mario Circuit on steroids. The whole track is anti-gravity twists and turns, and I think the intention is to make you go, whoa, as the world spins around you. And it kind of works. The Chinese dragon aesthetic is really cool, and the theme is a lot of fun, but I do think the design leans more into spectacle than into actually interesting racing. It's less about good track design and more about, look how twisty and crazy this dragon is, which is fun the first few times, but doesn't have as much depth or staying power as the best tracks in the game. Wario Stadium is just a lot of fun. It really captures that dirt bike stadium energy. The big jumps, the tight corners that reward you for hugging the inside as closely as possible. You know, great stuff. You can also tell this was originally a DS track, because right at the very end of the lap, they suddenly throw in a short anti-gravity section, then a short underwater section, then a short glider section, all in quick succession. It really feels like someone got to the end of designing the track and went, oh no, we forgot to include all the new gimmicks, and just threw them all together at the finish. It's not a bad thing at all. It's actually pretty charming, but it is noticeable. I was bare cheesed when I discovered that the Canadian track in this game wasn't based off Toronto and the Six, but Vancouver? I was sick to my stomachs, fam. Vancouver velocity actually gets worse as it goes on. Lap 1 is great. You cross the Capilano suspension bridge in anti-gravity, which is one of the only times a city track actually remembers to use anti-gravity, and it's brilliant. Lap 2 is decent, a drive through a park with a lake which you can't touch at all in a game with underwater driving, and then through an ice hockey stadium, which is a fun setting. But then lap 3 hits, and it's mostly a motorway tunnel, which is just a motorway tunnel. And then you do the hockey stadium again. Definitely an anticlimax. The nighttime setting throughout is really nice though. It gives the whole thing a Winter Olympics kind of energy that I'm into. Yoshi Valley started off way higher in my estimation before gradually dropping over time. When you first play it, it feels really interesting. Loads of branching paths, total freedom to choose your own route, a real sense of exploration. And unlike the city tracks, where you're constantly being funneled down confusing corridors by bright red arrows, here you actually get to choose where you go. That's a great idea. The problem is, once you've played it a few times, you realise there aren't really multiple routes. There's one route, because one path is clearly significantly faster than all the others. The freedom turns out to be an illusion. The giant egg rolling around is fun, the shortcuts near the end are enjoyable, and taking the fastest route does make for a fun route to be taking. It just sadly doesn't deliver on the premise that it sells you. I'll say up front, I've got no nostalgia for the Donkey Kong games, so that doesn't cloud my judgment of DK Jungle. What I love about it is the sense of exploration. You're making your way through this jungle before stumbling upon a crazy temple with some fun anti-gravity and a massive banana, which is exactly the kind of energy Mario Kart should have. There are some fun alternate routes dotted throughout too. I think the biggest negative is that the actual driving experience feels the most fun in the temple, and that's over quite quickly. The rest of the track design, theming aside, is fine, you know, it's good. This is a solid track that falls just short of being a great one. The theming of Thwomp Ruins is so cool. Nature and overgrowth creeping over crumbling ancient ruins. You know, it almost feels Breath of the Wild-esque in a way that really surprised me. I love the atmosphere. It's the final track of the Mushroom Cup, meaning it's essentially the end of the tutorial section, and you can feel it holding back a little. It does a good job of testing anti-gravity, underwater driving, and gliding all in one track, with some split paths thrown in there too. It's a smart piece of design for testing new players on everything the game has to offer. I just think if this track appeared anywhere else in the cup structure, it could have pushed its ideas much further, and I'd have loved to have seen that version of it. A Bowser-themed track that isn't a castle is already a pretty novel idea, and a futuristic rain-soaked city at night is a really cool execution of that. It's quite a difficult track, especially at 200cc, and I really like that. Neo Bowser City keeps you sharp. The main issue is that you're just essentially on one road the whole time. The background is full of these incredible futuristic structures and glowing city details, and none of it ever really makes it onto the track itself. It would have been amazing to have some of that backdrop actually become part of the racing, even just for a bit. Driving through some of those buildings, weaving around some of those tubes. The setting is there, but it's all just in the background. Bangkok Rush sounds like some sort of crime, but it's actually a Mario Kart track. I've never been to Bangkok, so I can't speak to how authentically it captures the city, but what I can say is that this is one of the city tracks that actually figures out how to turn its setting into interesting track design. Driving through the Chao Phraya River, choosing whether to take the canopies at the Makelong Railway Market or the BTS Skytrain overpass, and launching off the top of a car park onto the tents of the night market, it all feels genuinely connected to the place. The setting isn't the backdrop here, it's actually the track. More city courses should take note. I'm going to be upfront, I am a complete sucker for the music of Rosalina's Ice World, and that probably helps its placement more than it should. I don't really understand the Rosalina connection to this track, but it doesn't really bother me. I don't really like Rosalina or Mario Galaxy, to be honest. The half pipes are a fun mechanic, and the frozen route across the pond is a nice challenge. The ice shrinks a little more each lap, making it harder to jump onto as the race goes on, which is a clever touch. When you do get on it though, it's actually a bit anticlimactic to drive on and a bit boring. I actually think the journey to get there is more exciting than the reward. I completely understand why people love Music Park. The idea of instruments playing as you drive over them is genuinely inspired, and the track design around it is solid, with some fun corners. But in practice, I'm just not as bowled over by it as most people seem to be. My biggest issue is the ending. Those giant, ugly, bouncing note block things feel a bit random, and for a track built entirely around music, the finish should be a crescendo, something that really goes for it. Imagine instead of going through a big notes bouncing valley section, instead you're driving across the strings of a violin that plays this crazy, intense violin solo right as you cross the line. That'd be incredible. Instead, it just kind of ends. It's a good track that's just one big idea away from being a great one. The atmosphere of Grumble Volcano is fantastic, really oppressive and dramatic, and the track literally crumbling apart as the race goes on is such a cool feature. It genuinely feels like racing around the base of Vesuvius as it's about to take everything out. My biggest gripe is that when you think of a volcano, you think of scale, you think of something enormous and towering, and the actual track of Grumble Volcano is surprisingly flat. There's a real missed opportunity for some dramatic verticality here. You know, funnily enough, my favourite moments are the gliding sections, where you're dodging fire and lava, and that's exactly the kind of verticality I'm talking about. The track just needs more of it. As intro tracks go, Mario Kart Stadium is a really great one. I touched on why earlier in the video, but if you weren't listening, basically it's because it essentially explains anti-gravity in the clearest, most satisfying way in the whole game. You see the track rise up completely vertically in front of you. You hit the base of it, your wheels switch, and then you just drive straight up. It's immediately understandable and immediately exciting. For the very first track and new player experiences, that's exactly what you want. Sherbetland is just really genuinely cozy. The nighttime setting, the ice skating Shy Guys in the background, the whole wintry atmosphere, it all just makes me think of like the 22nd of December, just outside a Swiss village or something. I love it. There's an alternate route where you fall into a pond. In Double Dash, that was completely out of bounds, so it's a fun little nod that they turned it into a proper path here. It is actually slower than the main route, which is slightly disappointing, but the fact it exists at all is a nice touch. If I had to find a fault, the track can feel slightly uneventful in the middle stretch. There are moments where you're just kind of driving in a tunnel, then driving not in a tunnel, but honestly, in a track this charming, I think I can let it slide. Now, I know N64 Rainbow Road is really well loved, and don't get me wrong, the graphics look gorgeous, but I've got a design theory about Rainbow Roads in this series. You've got two types. The ones that are tough and chaotic and fun, but feel more like a frantic challenge than a mystical journey. You know, think SNES or Wii Rainbow Road. And then you've got the ones that feel like an epic journey, a proper send-off, the culmination of everything so far. Mario Kart 7's Rainbow Road, Mario Kart World's Rainbow Road, or the original N64 version that this track is based off. This iteration of Rainbow Road sits between both design philosophies, and nails neither. It's easy. I would never say this course has ever felt like a real challenge, but it also doesn't feel like a grand journey, because as beautiful as it looks, it's over almost before you've settled into it. I know a lot of people in the Mario Kart community have already said this, but I think instead of doing the whole thing once, we should really go through it twice, to make the most out of it and let its magnificentness fully embrace us, because at the moment it almost does have a bit of a blink and you miss it kind of feeling. Out of every Rainbow Road in this game, it's the one with, for sure, the biggest identity crisis. Calamari Desert is actually quite contained and simple, in a sense. You drive around a short train track loop in a pretty short racetrack loop. The difference is, here, compared to the original, you get to do a bit of driving on the train track as well. The way the route changes slightly each lap works really well here. It keeps things fresh without ever getting confusing the way city tracks do. The train crossings are a classic moment, and there's something really pleasantly timeless about the whole setting. Remember, this is the good tier, and this track sure is good. It's nice, it's cozy, but it's not as crazy mind-blowing as the best tracks tend to be. Dolphin Shoals is just fun from start to finish. The underwater sections with the strong currents pushing you around are a unique feeling you don't get anywhere else in the game. Sometimes they can be a bit clunky, but I do respect the experimentation. Tricking off the big eel is always a great moment, and then you burst out of the water right as the saxophone kicks in, and you've suddenly got this stormy ocean underneath you, and then an intense gliding section plus shortcut to close out the lap. It's a really fun sequence and a very fun track. I love Christmas, so I was always gonna like Merry Mountain, full disclosure. The journey up the mountain is excellent. You start in a cozy little Christmas village, you've got the option to veer onto the train tracks, and then you're climbing up through the snowy upper slopes before reaching the peak. It's a lovely layered ascent. The way down is where it loses a bit of steam though. It's weirdly empty compared to the energy of the climb up. It's not terrible, I'm not unleashing my nerd rage, but you go from this charming, busy village to a fairly bare descent, and it's a bit of an anticlimax. Yeah, chuck a few snowboarding Shy Guys on there or something. Now we have Mario Kart 8's own original Rainbow Road. Going back to my Rainbow Road identity theory, this one sits on the tough but fun side rather than the epic journey side, though not as extremely tough but fun as some of the others. I really like the space station setting, and I think that the split route shtick that Mario Kart 8 uses throughout a lot of the game is at its absolute best here. Trying to read the track and switch between the winding paths near the end is exciting. There are some tight turns too that I think are tip-top. When Mario Kart 8 first came out, and this was one of the 2 Rainbow Roads available, instead of one of 5 like it is now, some people felt it was a bit underwhelming compared to the past Rainbow Roads of Double Dash or Wii, which had a huge variety in their course elements. And I get that, as there aren't a great variety of course elements here. But I don't think this is a flop by any means. It's a fun, good-looking Rainbow Road, and it helps that there are now 3 better Rainbow Roads in the game, so this now works more so as a great companion to the others, as opposed to the Rainbow Road of the game. So, what did you think of this tier list so far? Would you order it any differently? And why didn't I mention Los Angeles Laps or Excite Bike Arena? Surely they're not in the goated tier, right? Well, find out next week when I cover the best tracks in the game. As a spoiler, I was a bit tipsy while recording the voiceover for that one. Sex is scary and I don't want to do it. There's a link in the description to make your own tier list based off this template if you're so inclined, and a link in the description to buy me a coffee if you'd like to support me that way. But if not, you can always like and subscribe. Muchas gracias chicos por ver el video. No olviden sus canales y nos vemos en el próximo.